gesunde Winter. Should be a healthy winter, healthy life. And all the good things that we worked for should come to fruition. And bless us and our brothers and sisters still in Simchat Torah, in Chutz La'aretz. Today is the 23rd day of Tishrei, the 25th of October, and we're starting chapter 24. והנה על פי זה יובן מה שכתוב בעץ חיים שבין אצילות לבריאה יש מסך ופרגוד, כי המסך הוא הלבוש המעלים ומסתיר, כדי שעל ידי זה יהיה בחינת יש ודבר נפרד, ולא בבחינת הילה ועלול. So everything we've been saying about the difference between Malchus of Atzilus, the Shechina, speech, and so on, the kingdom of emanation that comes down to give life, to sustain life in the three lower states of consciousness, called creation, formation, and action. This separation is described in the Eitz Chaim with a mashal, with a parable that's taken from the Mishkan, from the tabernacle, that there is a masach. A masach means a curtain.
I'm sorry?
A curtain.
Curtain, masach.
So this is basically the Wizard of Oz. That's what it is. It's telling you that you can't see directly.
Some introductory courses before
Yeah.
you start this.
You have to see. You have to see Wizard of Oz. Yes, Shakespeare, Plato, Aristotle. See, all those things came from this. So a lot of people who see these classes, they're living in a different cultural setting. So you have to connect it to their cultural setting. So the Wizard of Oz was exactly like that. Kuf Kafchet. So we have a friend, you probably know him, Asher Crisp. Every time we would drive to see Rav Ginsburg many years ago when they still lived here in Eretz Yisrael, so he would say, we're off to see the wizard. Why? Because there are some people who know what's going on behind the curtain. They see the guy who's pulling the strings. So they tell you all about it. So when you hear certain classes, when you hear certain people speak, it's like you have an image of what's going on behind the curtain. So you're off to see the wizard. Like the famous song from The Wizard of Oz. Ken, we talked a lot about that, Ken, Oz. And the Rav loves that word, Oz, because of Amzu. That these people are like a zoo. That every Jew is a different animal, and he has a whole thing about about this. In any case, so what's the idea of the curtain? The curtain, just like in The Wizard of Oz, is a barrier between the world of emanation and the three lower worlds. And again, when we say worlds, we don't mean somewhere else, we mean everything is here. But these are states of consciousness. So there's a barrier between the state of consciousness of the world of emanation, where everything remembers and connects back to its source in Hashem, and the three lower states of consciousness, creation, formation, and action, Bia, where there is no such memory and there's no feeling that there is even a connection. So you need to have this curtain in order to conceal what's really going on behind the scenes. And this curtain is what allows there to be a feeling of being separate, of being something that's not Ilah ve'alul. Like we said, Ilah ve'alul is like being born of something, so you have a memory of it. We were talking about the difference between the male and the female, the daughter and the son. So one of the things that comes out is Oilo le'mishe banav nekevot. The Gemara says at the end of, I think, Kedushin, that woe to him whose sons are daughters. What do you mean the sons are daughters? So the meaning is that the son, ben, is not the same word. In English it's the same word, son and being male. You're a son, you say. But in Hebrew we have also a different word for male, zachar. So to say his banim are nekevot is not to say his sons are daughters. His sons are feminine. What do they mean by that? They mean to say that they don't remember. The zachar, the whole point of a zachar, of the male, is that he remembers. What does he remember? He remembers his source and where he came from. Why is this? So the mashal that we've seen, we haven't seen it here, but hopefully when we learn Shorish Mitzvat Priya V'Rviyah, the Mitzvat Priya V'Rviyah, we'll see about being fruitful and multiplying, that the description in Kabbalah is that the very essence of the mind of the Father becomes the Son. So the Son remembers his source in the Father. Right, that's the idea, that the masculine remembers its source. That's why it's called Zachar. Zachar means to remember, Nizkor. So what does it remember? Remembers its source. The feminine, the Nekeva, it's like that memory has been taken out. It doesn't remember. So that's why we said that the feminine, the three lower worlds, are relatively feminine to the world of Atzilus, to the world of emanation. They're feminine because they don't remember where they came from. They're not Scharim, they're Nekevot. Okay. And this is like the physical curtain whose purpose is to conceal the light. So if you have curtains on your drapes on your windows, so you put them there because you want to keep the light out. And even though some light does penetrate, even through the heaviest curtain, the heaviest drapes, it's called urak or shel tolada. It's only a once removed type of light. It's not the light itself, it's not direct light, it's a tolada, it's born from it. So what you see is like a hue around the drape. You don't, if it's heavy enough, not everything gets through. One example of this would be the light of the moon, which is a luminance from the light of the sun. The first, the moon receives the light from the sun, and it absorbs it. It absorbs quite a bit of it. And then what it reflects is only a little bit. So it's very interesting what he's saying here. He's saying that it's not even an indirect light. This is a big deal. Like, when we see a reflection, what is this reflection? Is it the light that came from the sun and hit off the moon and then came to us? Or is it changed? So obviously it was changed. There's no question that it was changed. Why? Because we see it a different color. And you can only get certain colors out of if you put it into a prism, you won't get all the colors that you get from the sun. So something changed. So the reflection, as far as I know, the reflection is not 100% the same thing. It's a derivative of it. It's a derivative of what there was in the sun. So the same thing happens with a curtain. Now this is very important because the curtain is also called tzimtzum. It's also called a contraction, but it's a different type of contraction than the contraction that we're usually used to. The contraction that we are used to in the beginning of creation, as it were, meaning at the beginning of any process of creation, is a creation of concealment, to completely conceal something. The purpose here is not to completely conceal. The purpose here is to limit, to diminish, which is not the same thing as concealment. To conceal means that, give the example, the famous story from the Alter Rebbe, that he was playing with his grandson, with the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said, show me where Saba is, where's your grandfather? He was playing with him, and he says, where am I? So he points here, and he says, but this is Saba's head. So he points here, Saba's nose, Saba's body. So finally the grandson's smart, so he says, Saba, leave the room a second. So he leaves the room, he understands that he's caught on. It's a little kid. And he says, Saba, he calls him. And then he appears and he says, Ine Saba. That's the difference between concealment and diminishment. That when you diminish, you can only get part of something. It's because you can't grasp all of it. But to conceal means that when you reveal it, you reveal everything. Everything all at once. So it's the thing in and of itself. So when he told him to leave the room, everything left. There's no diminishment anymore. It's not just his nose or his... and he called him back in, so here's Saba. The whole thing, here it is. So it's very important that this is a form of contraction, but it's different than the contraction at the beginning of creation, as it were. So, for instance, for Hashem to create a space for the world in general, for even there to be physical matter, for there to be any kind of consciousness, he has to completely conceal himself. He has to leave the presence, the premises, as it were. And then there's room for something else, as it were, to exist. But this is concealment in order to diminish, to make it indirect, to have a smaller piece of it, but not the whole thing. And that's the masach, the curtain between the world of emanation and the three lower worlds.
So we call mi'ut.
Mi'ut minkom tzimtzum. Usually they even use a different word, which is mi'ut, but sometimes it's called tzimtzum. ובמקום אחר מבואר גם כן עניין הפרסה על פי מה שכתוב לקטו אבנים ועשו גל אם אני לא אעבור אליך ואתה לא תעבור אליי. So there's another mashal that's given. So all this, the curtain is 100% from the Mishkan. That's where this comes from. There's a very important mimer in Torah Or called Patach Eliyahu, which discusses the 13 curtains in the not in the tabernacle. There was only 2, but in the base of Mikdash there were 13 curtains. So it discusses what all these mean, but these are all facets of diminishment of the light, because in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, the light came from inside out. What do we mean the light came? It wasn't physical light. I don't know, maybe they also saw physical light, I don't know. But the point was that Hashem was appearing through the tabernacle. That was like the connecting point between the world of the infinite and the finite world. So as the light was coming out, that's creation. Creation is bereshit, bara. Bara is to bring something out. So it was being diminished by the curtain. But there's another mashal, there's another parable for this, which is beautiful, because as we'll see, the whole idea of a curtain, we won't see it today, we'll see it God willing next week, the whole idea of the curtain is a parable and its meaning. We'll see this as we go on. So another parable for this is that when Jacob was fleeing from Laban, so eventually Laban caught up with him, and when he accosted him in the morning, he approached him in the morning, Hashem had already told Laban, don't say anything negative, certainly don't do anything to Jacob, because I'll punish you. So they decided to make a barrier between them. And the barrier was called the gal. Gal is like a pile. So it's a pile of stones. So Yaakov said, Liktu avanim v'asu gal. He told his sons, collect stones and make a pile. And then this pile will be the separation between me and you. Now, why is this such a good parable for him? Because avanim henotiyot. So, in Sefer Yetzirah, the stones are a synonym for letters. So all our speech, when we transform from feeling and from understanding into words, into intellect, and we'll go even deeper as we already did, but we'll revisit this as we go on with this chapter. So we're crossing this barrier, this curtain, between the way things are in the world of emanation, the way they are in the more concrete physical worlds, which is where we speak, where we live. So Bezrat Hashem, we'll see that next week at Shabbos, first Shabbos of the year, the way a person stands in the first Shabbos of the year. Hopefully it'll continue on the whole year. So we should all stand in a good place.
For you.